Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. It's in the description below, your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing the latest and greatest version of the Vacheron Constantin Quai, 41 millimeters in stainless steel. The Quai here is a watch that is compact, 12.1 millimeters thick, 41 millimeters across, and from lug to lug, a manageable but substantial 50.1 millimeters with a 23 millimeter spacing between the lugs. I'll talk in a moment about why this is the ultimate version of the Quai in my opinion, but starting with the basics, the steel model of this watch came out in 2016, a full 8 years after its original launch. It was elaborately rendered with metallization of the dial, currency-based anti-counterfeiting technology, and frankly, a chaotic aesthetic that included too many optional builds for the case of different metals and materials, a hodgepodge you could customize on Vacheron's website. But if there's one lesson we've learned from the Royal Oak 15202 and the Nautilus 5711, it's that people would rather have one great design consistently and beautifully produced. And that is what Vacheron struck upon in 2016 with the steel model. This model, with the blue dial and the steel case, arrived the next year in 2017 with another big upgrade that we'll talk about in a moment. Putting the watch on my wrist, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see it's a big watch. As dress watches go, and it did start as a dress watch, it's very substantial. The watch is thin, though. You can see it will easily slide underneath the cuff. It's thinner than a Rolex Daytona at 12.1 millimeters, so this will slide underneath a dress shirt cuff. No problems there. I would say if your wrist is smaller than 15 centimeters circumference, this is probably not the watch for you, but it has an impressive presence. So if you feel like your dress watch needs to be a bit broader, have a more aggressive stance, a little bit more imposing, that's exactly what this offers. This, in a lot of ways, is an homage to the great first, third, 20th century Vacheron Constantin cushion cases. And we'll get to more of that in a moment after we talk about the strap. As I mentioned, this started as a dress watch, often a precious metal dress watch in 2008, but today it's a sports watch, and this matte vulcanized rubber Vacheron strap attests to that. It's a navy blue matte finish. It has a little bit of a character line molded in on each side. Turn it over, you can see it's very thick and substantial. There are striations cut into the bottom to remove material that makes it more flexible, but also allows the wrist to breathe on a hot day. It is a brand new Vacheron Constantin factory strap, and while this watch is one of the most cost-effective ways to get into Poisson de Genève or Geneva seal watchmaking, there are really no compromises. You don't get a pin buckle, you don't get stuck with a Val Fleurier movement. You get a full deployant clasp here, media blasted and polished internally. You can see that there's that Maltese cross motif, and then there is a twin trigger system, so this cannot pop open accidentally. It does have a trigger release, and you have to positively disengage it. That's security along with the buckle against droppage while donning or removing at bedside. Now, I mentioned that the watch is an homage to first, third, 20th century Vacheron cushion cases and tonneau cases, and it is that, but if you look closely, you can see in the machine age aesthetic of these lugs in particular, with their high polish and tiered arrangement, that there's a little bit of a nod to architecture from the period, specifically Art Deco architecture, such as the interior of the Empire State Building or the top of the Chrysler Building. There's also a handsome interplay of satin and polish, with each striking in juxtaposition to the other. Again, people don't want a million customization options. People want one good design consistently executed. There's the Maltese cross on the crown. The crown is a pushdown, but we may as well talk about the big upgrade that came for 2017. If you look on the reverse side of this watch, the reference is 4500S/1, and the difference was 100 meters water resistance versus the previous 30 meters. Folks often remarked from 2016 that the steel Quai looks an awful lot like a sports watch, and this particular K is a sports watch, as water resistance went from the original splash only 30 meters to 100, so you can swim with this watch. It's also loomed, and we'll show that later. The dial has a blue sector outboard, and you can see that the center dial is sunken and separate. It has this sort of chapter ring printed in white on blue with radially arrayed and fully loomed Arabic numerals, and then inboard you can see that there's a date disc, but the date disc itself doesn't actually move. It's the index that indicates the date. That is what moves. And yes, the index is loomed. So is the date disc. Inboard, you can see that the center dial is just like the outer face. There is a white gold Vacheron Maltese cross logo in high polish, and then in contrast to the high polish, you have blackened and satin finished hands for a muted and handsome look. Rolling everything over, you can see the caliber 5100, which was designed first and foremost to go in the Generation 3 overseas, so it's a rugged movement, and it's also a large movement that's properly sized for a case like this. This is something we don't see enough at Patek, for example, where the 324 and then the 26 330 after it are relatively small movements that are used interchangeably regardless of the case size. They get plunked into Calatravas and even sports watches that are just a little bit too big for them. The 5100 is broad. It's also beautiful. You can see the Poinçon de Genève on the case as well as the movement. Since 2012, it has been a full watch standard for fine finish. So you have mirrored anglage on the bridges, and you can see that to good effect. I'll do my best to show it here under the camera. That rounded mirrored chamfer that's finished up with wood. They're started mechanically, but they're finished manually, and that mirrored rounded gleam is the proof. Now, there is a tungsten rotor. That's really the only concession here. A tungsten rotor versus gold on more upscale models, but the finish of the movement is identical. The Côte de Genève are deeply ridged, and you can see that sharp gradient from light to dark. They are luminous, light, effervescent waves. All of the screw heads, as well as the regulator cap, are black polished on their top. The screw heads feature chamfered slots as well as circumference. There's engine turning on the base plate, and then there's satination on the wheels of both the winding reduction system as well as the train. The watch beats away at 28,800 vibrations per hour. It has a quick set for the date, though not stop seconds. It has a 60-hour power reserve. It uses ceramic rotor bearings for high efficiency and minimal maintenance requirements. You can see that the movement, which pivots on 37 joules, is also adjusted in 5 positions, which is the high horology and chronometer standard. You can see that gorgeous anglage lighting up. So this is a precise watch in addition to a beautiful watch. This is what the Quai de Lille should have been back in 2008. Finally perfected, water-resistant steel, maximized beauty, maximized durability, minimized complexity. Reach out to Tim Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details. Back with the Quai de Lille by night, you can see the date jumper is quite amusing, and that the full date disc itself is loomed.